What a difference a generation makes. We're going to talk about the joys and struggles of parenting through the generations tonight. So please stay with us. Thank you very much. Thank you and welcome. I'm Father Mitch, and welcome to EWTN Live, where we bring you guests from all over the world. But before we get to today's guest, I want to mention how yesterday on my Threshold of Hope program, I spoke briefly about the terrible humanitarian situation in Iraq and Syria and some of the other countries now, even Lebanon, and how we need, above all, to pray for peace. However, we can also work and contribute in any way that we can to help the Christians and other people who are suffering in the Middle East. I'm pleased to let you know that earlier today, the Knights of Columbus announced that they have established a fund to assist Christians and other religious minorities, whether they're Christian or not, all those who are facing horrific, violent persecution in Iraq, especially in Syria and the surrounding regions. I just saw today more Yazidi men were just executed, and now their wives and children are told to either convert or be killed themselves. It's horrible. So, earlier today, EWTN News nightly anchor Brian Patrick spoke with Supreme Knight Carl Anderson about this fund. Please take a look at it.
In launching this fund for the people of Iraq who are fleeing from religious persecution, is this really a new step out for the Knights, or is this a continuation of what the Knights do all over the world?
Well, it really is a continuation. We put millions of dollars into hurricane relief after Hurricane Katrina. We've been helping in the Philippines after the typhoon there earlier in the past year. After 9/11, we set up $1 million fund to help the families of the first responders who were killed. We've been in the Middle East before. We established a Pacham and Terrace Fund to help promote peace in the Holy Land and support Christian education there. So we've been involved in many of these kinds of situations, going all the way back to the 1920s when we were helping our Mexican brothers and sisters during the persecution of the Catholic Church there by the Mexican government. So we've been at this for many, many years, but of course this situation now is something new that Christians around the world are going to have to recognize and respond to.
So the Knights have in fact pledged an initial $500,000 and will match an additional $500,000 in donations from the public. 100% of all donations collected will be used for humanitarian assistance. And right now there are about 350,000 people fleeing from the army of ISIS right now. So if you would like to help with the relief effort, you can donate to the Knights of Columbus Christian Refugee Relief by visiting www.kofc.org/Iraq, or you can send checks or money orders to KOFC Christian Refugee Relief, Knights of Columbus Charities, Post Office Box 1966. That's in New Haven, Connecticut, 06509. And I had a very brief conversation. Other folks are beginning to organize prayer vigils for the people in the Middle East, and they want to do it nationwide, but we'll have more about that as time goes on. All right, now we'd like to get to our guest. He is a clinical psychologist, an author, the father of 10 children, ages 14 to 26. And he's here tonight to help parents learn, laugh, stand strong. He's the host of the EWTN TV series, Living Right with Dr. Ray, as well as the EWTN radio show, The Doctor Is In. So please welcome good friend, Dr. Ray Guarendi.
Father Mitch.
How the heaven are you?
I'm here tonight not because of what you think.
Huh.
I'm here tonight because it's quieter here and it smells better than my house.
Ain't that something? Mm-hmm. Well, we're glad to accommodate you that and any other amenities we can help you with. But does your wife know you're talking like that about her house?
My wife would agree with me.
Oh?
By the way, I was talking to some folks, and I, for a while, stood in awe of you.
Yes.
How many languages do you speak?
12.
12. Okay. Now here's my theory.
Yes.
I think what you did is you cherry-picked about 4 vocabulary words out of each language. Uh-huh. And then you say them, and people think, oh, he knows that language. But we don't know enough to know that you don't know that language. Plus, I noticed you picked these languages that nobody speaks, like Aramaic and, those languages. Uh-huh. So I'm wondering if this is just kind of like 30 or 40 vocabulary words that you mix and match.
Well, yeah, it's a scam. But they hired me at the university to teach Hebrew, so I guess it worked.
Well, at least those 4 words.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's probably a very...
And I just stretched it out for a whole year.
Very easy final exam.
Yeah, it's easy.
You know more languages than anybody I know.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
We just got to hang around more scripture, guys. It's a matter of fact, it's something that, people who do work in biblical theology know these languages because these are tools. Like I said to an audience the other day, when it comes to working in the garage, I tend to be a mechanical moron. I'm not very good at that stuff. But languages, I can do those tools better. So it's just a different set of tools.
Every time I see you, it's as though you've learned another language.
No. I just keep working on the ones, trying to get up to 5 words for each language.
Okay, all right. I just thought I was a little nervous about exposing you. Didn't want to say anything.
It's okay. It's all right.
Is that against canon law or something?
No.
Okay.
No.
Right.
Uncle Luigi will have something to say later. So,
yes.
One of the things that everybody loves about your show is the good sense that backed up with a lot of insight from your own field of clinical psychology that you bring to various situations in families. There are times I have a couple of cats, and when they, especially the one, wants something to eat, she'll just stand on my chest while I'm sleeping in bed and get me up. And then once I'm up and feed her, there's always your show to turn to, and I'll watch that.
Where you
night.
get the indigestion.
No. It's just better than Somonix. No, they. And so, but really, I enjoy watching your show because of those common sense plus the experience of clinical psychology. It's not only common sense, it's not only clinical psychology background, but it's using these two together. And this is something that a lot of folks need in today's society raising families. Does that make sense?
I will say in a presentation that the generation above me, in my opinion, was the last generation to have sense about parenting across the board. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. my generation and below has started to second guess, become tentative, question ourselves, feel guilt when we shouldn't feel guilt, have lost authority, and we are wrapped up in psychological correctness. If I say just the right words, with the right win-win scenario, using active listening instead of passive listening, little Butkus will say, "Oh, Father, I've been so blind." Of course, you make such perfect sense.
Yeah.
Let us sing Kumbaya around the campfire. We've sold a bill of goods to parents.
Yep. You know, as a matter of fact, even in English language today, you hear that self-questioning, unsureness. By the way, people will say, are we going to have a show? You know,
Everything ends upwards in a question.
As if it's a question, because did I say anything right? Was it okay? That's in the language. I think it started in the valley out in California, but it's now everywhere. And people just end up like, did I say okay? And so this is something about people not having confidence
Listen
of
to
what
parents.
they're trying to do.
Listen to parents talk in a preschool setting. Igor, can we go now? Would you like to get your coat now? Is that okay? Is that all right? I call it putting discipline in question. If the child were straight with you, he would say, "No, it's not all right. I don't want to get my coat right now. Why are you asking?" But as parents, we have been taught by the shrinks, let's all just get along. Let's not be autocratic. Let's set up win-win interface scenarios where the child cooperates and recognizes that father is not an authoritarian. He's a democratic, persuasive facilitator of child rearing. That's what's happened.
Yeah. You know,
Of course, I sell a lot of books that way, so I'm not totally against it.
I certainly remember one of my father's favorite lines, especially about the time I entered adolescence. "I'm your father, not your friend. Make your own friends. Do what I tell you." And you know, I disliked
How dictatorial.
It was. Oh, it was. And I thought so too. But as he also said frequently, "You're going to thank me for this someday." Never that day. Never that day.
You were waiting for someday, huh?
But he would say, yeah, but it did come along, you know, where you realize there was sense in this. He needed to be the dad. I could make my own friends, and I did. And in adulthood, I could be his friend. But as a child relationship, there's something where he had to take the leadership.
Did your father love you?
Yeah,
You knew it.
yeah.
So that when he talked like that, you didn't view him as some overbearing, autocratic, psychologically suffocating adult, did you?
Oh, I thought that.
Oh, you didn't think that used those words?
Yeah, no.
Okay,
I didn't know
so-
those
okay.
words. But I thought that, you know, but I also learned that's just me hoping to have some ideas by which I can manipulate him to do what I wanted to do anyway. And later on, I learned he was correct in doing this, the limitations he set.
Did your father have the look?
At the very least.
You look at a kid nowadays, most of them look back at you. What are you looking at? You want to mess with this? The look is dead.
Yeah.
And that is probably the single biggest indicator of parental loss of authority across the board. Clients will come in my office and they'll say, "Well, tell me how to control him. Tell me what I need to do." And I will say, "I don't know if I can teach you how to have authority that he perceives. Your father, did you ever have a point in your life at age 3, 5, 7, 9, 12, 60, where
65.
65. All right. I was holding off there. I didn't want to get too close to the edge. Where you said to yourself, all right, who's he think he is? He's not going to tell me what to do. Ever?
Twice when I was 13. And
Were you looking up from the ground or what?
Yes. No, I was looking up from the bottom of the stairway. and again, that was twice. And then that never happened again.
But you still perceived his authority. You didn't.
Exactly.
You may have gotten angry and you wanted to get in his face.
Right.
But it wasn't a matter of, he has no authority over me.
No.
Right. And I tell parents, that was perception. Something back in you, way back, 18 months, 16 months, back when you only knew 4 languages, was implanted in you that you just didn't challenge him. You didn't argue with him. You didn't, if you were put in a corner, you didn't throw a fit and come out 27 times. You didn't look at him at bedtime and say, make me. You didn't.
No.
I'll tease my clients. I will say, what would your mother or father had done had you talked to them the way your daughter is talking to you? I never would have talked to my mother that way. Why not? You were a teenage girl once. Why didn't you? Well, I knew. You knew what? Something would happen. What? I don't know. Why don't you know? It never happened. Why didn't it happen? I never did it. Why didn't you do it? Something would have happened. What? I don't know. Who's on first? I don't know. Third base! But you see what it speaks of, Father?
Right.
It's that perception. That's gone. That is gone. It's this idea that now kids can challenge, they can negotiate, they can argue, they can come at you, and if you have strong, confident authority, you're psychologically a Neanderthal.
Or you're causing trauma to the kid. He'll never get over it.
Never.
Yep.
I tell my children, I'm giving you material for your therapist. Don't blame me if you're on Springer.
And we can maybe get professional courtesy from the therapist.
That's right. I got a package deal for most of my children. I had, if you'll forgive me, I share with your audience and audience at home. I don't want to brag. Permit me to brag. We had one of those moments as a parent where you feel good about your parenting. My son's parole officer said one of the nicest kids he has. So, you just see, it warms you up.
Oh, exactly.
Yes.
You just beam. And, this is something that there was also real clarity that I, as a kid, was not the most important unit in the group. And that's something I think that was very important, that the family was a group all together. We were all involved in trying to make it through life together. And therefore, we're all going to cooperate. And Mom and Dad saw to that.
Okay, Father, what happened? What was the education of your mom and dad? What level?
My dad had 8th grade and my mother 9th grade.
Okay. So what happened when my generation is much more educated than my father's? Much. Here's your mom and dad with 8th and 9th grade education. Why is it that, at least in the household, it was very clear? You used the word clarity. It was very clear that they ran things. And you were okay with that as a kid for the most part.
Yeah,
moment
right.
to moment you got mad, but for the most part.
Right.
What happened between them, the unsophisticated, uneducated generation, and mine and below? What happened? Do you know?
I have a couple observations. One, among the families that stayed intact, there is a theory that I want my kids to have it better than I did. I want to give them stuff that I never had, toys I couldn't afford, et cetera, et cetera. That's one very common thing. a second and totally catastrophic reality I see is in the late 60s with the sexual revolution. Marriage became a negotiable.
An option.
Exactly. And one that it became in the mind of many people of our generation. Oh, it's just a piece of paper from City Hall. I don't need City Hall to tell me who I can love, or the church, or anybody else. And that did not lead to loving more people, or even loving the one you're with for a lifetime. But it became the basis that we went from, in 1940, where 4% of all children were born out of wedlock. 1960, 5%. And now today, 43% of all children. Because parents no longer became committed to the people that the adults they're with, and certainly not to the children. And that has been a second catastrophic event.
Seismic.
Absolutely.
Would you say that the folks who watch this program, for the most part, are more family-oriented than the norm?
Probably.
Okay. And if we were to poll your audience, we could say that maybe 80-90% of them are still in committed husband-wife relationships, even as grandparents. Okay.
So I would also add one other thing.
Okay.
A lot of those grandparents are now raising children that their children won't take care of.
Highest percentage ever.
Yep.
Highest percentage recorded. Last I heard it was
It's
8%.
not because the
It's higher than that
children,
now.
because the parents of the little children have died. It's because they're just gone. And grandparents are in their 60s, 70s, and even later, trying to raise a kid.
Yes.
And that's very common.
So given that, would our advice to those folks essentially be understand that the general culture is not going to think like you? Understand that you cannot use them as a guide on how to supervise, what media to allow, when to give social freedom, when to spank, when to discipline, how much to monitor their friends. You cannot use a majority. Your parents could use a majority, could they not?
Yes.
Most thought like your parents.
As a matter of fact, all the moms were in on it. They all knew each other. And if we monkeyed around in Mrs. Pavin's yard or Mrs. Sika's yard, we would get it there.
The information got home before you did.
Yes.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
One of the things I now have to spend an inordinate amount of time dealing with as a shrink is the idea that good parents feel beleaguered and critiqued and analyzed and second-guessed by their family members, oftentimes by their church community, by the people around them, sometimes by their mom and dad, because they are attempting to go against the flow of that culture out there.
Even strangers will come up to parents of when they have a number of children and criticize them without even knowing them for having so many children, like 4 or 5 kids. You know that, and you 10 kids.
I don't take them out in public.
Oh, okay.
No, 3 sins left in our culture, Father: smoking, spanking, and having more than 1.74 children. Those are the 3 sins left.
Yep.
And the idea that you can go after a pregnant woman. I cannot tell you how many pregnant mothers have told me they no longer tell their family members that they're pregnant. They will not share it with their friends. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it. But does that not reflect what you and I talked about 10 minutes ago, which is the loss of parental authority? Because if you have 4 or 6, I can't imagine that. I can't handle the 1 that I have.
Yes.
I can't handle the 2 that I have. How could you function with 5?
Yep.
And I just simply say, I let my wife do it. I UPS her things when she needs them.
But this is, something that is extraordinarily important to understand. That the culture is not wise when it comes to children.
That's right.
You see this breakdown of family. That 43% of children who are born out of wedlock, they account for the great majority of our poor.
And prison population.
And our prison, 80% of the people in our prisons are the children of unwed mothers. And it does not matter in regard to race or ethnic background. What is the big factor is not race, but do you marry the man with whom you have children? Do you marry the woman you want to be the mother of your children? And that you live together and make a commitment. You are irreplaceable to me. And we are both irreplaceable to our children. There's nobody else who can take our place. And we're going to stay with this through the difficulties. That is what makes the difference also across racial lines and ethnic lines between those who are poor, those who are on drugs, who are physically abused, sexually abused, and those who get an education. Those are all factors that come in. And it's a matter of saying we're family. And that means something very clear and definite.
One of the uphill battles in doing therapy, and any therapist will tell you this, is somebody will come in and describe a lot of immoral or self-defeating or hurtful behavior that's tearing the fabric of their life apart. Getting them past the justifications that they have formed for that behavior. Our culture is on a culture-wide journey of justification. What you're describing is fact. You can't argue with it. All of the social scientists say the same thing. Divorce is bad for kid. Single motherhood is the leading cause of poverty and imprisonment. Kids who grow up without a father are far more likely to abuse drugs, to commit suicide, to get in trouble with the law, to drop out of school. That's fact. But our culture finds a way to justify it. And I guess what I'm saying to you folks, don't buy into the justification. You're different. As Father says, culture's not wise.
No. As a matter of fact, you mentioned 3 mortal sins according to the culture. A 4th that really, really upsets them. Don't be judgmental. Don't judge me. Don't say that what I'm doing is wrong. Who do you think you are, God? You'll hear that again and again. And you say, well, I'm not God. I don't want to be. Can't be. But I know what God said in his law. And I also had parents that gave me common sense. And I learned as I grew older. And what you're doing is dumber than a box of rocks. So stop.
See, you get to say stuff like that as a therapist. I can't.
Oh, okay.
Actually, I can sometimes.
Yeah,
if I know my clients, I know them well, I could look and say, what were you thinking?
Exactly.
Why would you do something so dumb? And some folks will look at you and say, you're right. You're absolutely right.
See, one of the ways we can get away with it too, especially here in the South, you just start off, bless his heart, but you're dumber than a box of rocks.
You always say, bless his heart,
Bless his
and that
heart.
kind of covers the multitude.
Yeah,
bless your heart.
and it just covers.
Would that count as a language?
No.
Okay.
But it's something where, for people of sense to cease being afraid
Yes.
to speak sensibly
Yes.
about sensible things.
I tell parents, find one other parent that thinks like you, that will triple your emotional strength. You will not feel isolated. You will not feel alone. You will realize you're not, who was it? Bishop Sheen that said, I got to get this right. Wrong is wrong, even if everybody is wrong. Right is right, even if nobody is right.
Right.
You have to have enough confidence as a parent to say, what I'm doing is correct for my family with my moral system. And I don't care if all around me disagree. Parents will say to me, well, Dr. A, is it right? And I'll say, stop. Who's the parent? Well, I am. Then 80% of the time you are right because this is your judgment to make. Right. It's not a matter of taking a poll of 100 experts or 1,000 parents. It's your house. Well, we got rid of our TV. Is that okay? Your decision.
Except for watching EWTN.
Well, yeah. Right now you're not even knowing I'm saying this. So.
But it's, and I think, again, one of the keys, you begin, this is why when you have a small baby, you don't say, oh, you, young man, are 1 month old. You should know better than to mess your diaper. No, you just deal with them with all the different things. You give them unconditional love. But by the time the kid gets that glint in his eye as he's about to do something naughty, and he's looking to see what the parents will do as he chooses something naughty, by that point, that unconditional love has to be peppered and salted with a good dose of the kind of love that makes sure the boy or the girl learns not to be so dumb.
You know what parents do, Father? They differentiate between what you're talking about. They'll say, well, I had to use a little bit of tough love. And I'll correct them. I'll say, no, that's not tough love. That's love.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
We've bought into the language, which is, well, if you stand your ground and if you're a confident parent and you do what's good for your child and you don't budge on it, well, that's tough love. No. That's just love.
Yeah.
Don't let other people tell you that's tough love.
You love your child unconditionally, but you also love what is good because it's good, what is right because it's right. And you love your child enough to draw them into that at their own pace. And that's what's key. But one of the things that we also have to love is that we've run out of time for this part of the show. So we're going to come back in about 2 minutes. And we want to get your questions as well as those of our studio audience. So please stay with us. Welcome back. Welcome back. First of all, I want to thank all of these nice folks from different parts of the country who've come over here, especially we got a big group of folks from New Jersey and New York. Good to have you, plus a lot of other folks, even as far away as Jamaica and as far away as Singapore. So that's they win the big prize. So, the long distance award anyway. So if you can come over here, please contact our pilgrimage department. Their number is 271-2966. Or you can go to our website, EWTN.com, and they'll give you all sorts of information about scheduling of programs and masses, directions all over the place to get here, as well as to restaurants, hotels, and to Huntsville. And we'd love to have you come over here and join us.
Now?
Well, they can come another night.
Oh, okay.
Okay. They got a plan. All right. They're not spontaneous as you. Let's take a question from our studio. Sir, where are you from?
I'm from Philadelphia, Father.
Good to have you here. Welcome. And your question?
Well, Father and Dr. Ray, I wonder if you have any thoughts or comments on what seems to be an increasing role in government in micromanaging or policing the way parents maybe do too much to their children or don't do enough. I mean, obviously, if a parent starves their child to death, I think there's a role for government policing. But I just seem to hear in the news now more and more of government sanctioning parents because of the decisions that they make, especially in the area of discipline or negligence.
All right. That's a pretty wide issue, in fact. Last week, I think it was, a mom was picked up by the police because she let her 10-year-old son or so go to the park by himself. There's a lot of this involvement. Take a look. What are some of the kinds of issues associated with that?
The philosopher says there are two things that make people behave. One is an inner moral system. The other is the point of a gun. What's happening, I believe, our government decided we're not going to behave, we're going to make you behave. We're going to intrude. And on top of that, we have good intentions because we're smarter than you. We follow the experts who say you can't do that. You spank that kid out in public, woo! Okay? So that's the natural course of things. When what you were talking about, Father, the family breaks down, something is going to come into that vacuum. And in our case, it is not the clan, it is not the tribe, it is not the extended family, it is now the government. A natural course of events. I will tell you, addressing this gentleman's question, most of the clients that I've had who get referred to children's services for suspected abuse, neglect, are neither abusive nor neglectful. They disciplined in a way that somebody disapproved of. A friend of mine called me once. He said that he was in the bathroom. His 3-year-old got out the front door and was playing down by the road. Cop happened to go by, saw the child, brought him to the house, knocked on the door. My friend came and said, "Hey, thank you, officer. Thank you so much. I was in the bathroom. I don't know how he got out. I thought I had the door locked." He called me the next day. He was turned in.
Is that right?
He was turned in. And part of the irony on that is it no longer, for many, becomes a, let me explore that situation. It's, does your daddy hit you? Really? When does he hit you? Have you ever been sent to bed without supper? How long? You see, for many, it almost becomes a, we're going to make sure that you're parenting correctly. I remember one time my oldest son, he used to bounce down the steps on his bottom. So he had some bruises. I told my wife, do not send him to preschool. I don't want to deal with that. Because by law, they are bound to report that. It's suspicious. I said, don't send him. I don't even want to deal with it. So you're right, it's a very real thing, but I tell parents you cannot parent in fear. You have to be who you are. And at some point, hopefully, this will swing back and some of these agencies won't be quite so intrusive.
Another area where it's becoming just brand new with the new health care laws, children are being asked by their pediatricians questions about the family that have nothing to do with discipline or abuse or the kind of food, but do your parents own any guns? And why are pediatricians now required by the federal government to ask children if there are guns in the house? That whether legal or not. This is something that's very weird. Another area of intrusion is even much more, well, that's now becoming common. Pediatricians must ask those questions.
They don't have to get answers, by the way.
No, they don't.
That's right.
That's right.
People don't understand. You don't have to get answers.
The kids do not have to answer those questions at all, but they have to ask it. But another area of great intrusion is the sexual education programs, especially in the government schools. That this should be the realm of parents.
The schools would say, but the parents aren't doing it, so somebody has to do it.
And I would say, all right, teach the parents how to talk about these issues.
The parents won't do it. Parents won't follow through. Here's the argument. The argument is not so much that some of this stuff is being taught. I was taught some of it in the 9th grade,
Yes.
not the 3rd.
Or kindergarten.
Yes. I have advised many parents when they ask me this question, keep him home.
Yep.
Well, yeah, but then he'll be the only one and he'll feel odd, or if he goes to the library, so be it. It's not the timing for your son or daughter.
Exactly.
My son said something fascinating, and he went to Catholic school. He was probably 1st or 2nd grade. Dad, the only time I ever hear about drugs is at school. Not from the kids, by the way.
Okay. All right. Let's take a question from our studio audience. Ma'am, where are you from?
Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
Good to have you. What's your question?
Several times you've mentioned confident parenting. You know, the word confident comes from 2 stems, confide, with faith. Would you comment on that?
Hey, now she's throwing in some Latin stuff, so this is your turf.
Okay. See, these are 2 of the words I know in Latin.
Okay, give
2
me
out of the 4.
Semper, semper and ubi.
Yeah. Old Latin jokes.
Yes.
One of the things that is extremely important, and I say this to couples when I'm preparing them for marriage. If you love your spouse more than you love God, or when you have children, if you love your children more than you love God, you are asking for a catastrophe. Because at that point, you will expect your spouse and or your children to be as good as God.
But Father, my emotions are much stronger toward my children. I don't experience those kinds of emotions towards God.
I don't care. I didn't say to have a feeling. I said to love. And that's where you put God first ahead of your spouse. And as such, of course, the feelings for your spouse, your child might be very strong. However, they too will pass. And this is where a love commitment by which you love God to be God and accept your spouse and your children as fellow sinners who are also equally loved by God. Then you will love your spouse and your children more than if you put them first, because they don't have the capacity to be first. They will frustrate you inherently, whereas God can be God, and you accept your spouse and children as they are. And that sense of faith in God first and the love that flows from that faith will enable a good perspective on your spouse and children as fellow sinners who need God's mercy and wisdom and grace just as much as you do.
So her question, confide, with faith, you're saying that if you have God's perspective, you can act with confidence? Because this is not just your opinion on how to live or how to raise children. You are following God's guidance, which if you don't understand it all the time, it's still, you have enough faith that it's the best way to live.
Not only that, I would even add that I'm loving my spouse in a way to help her get to heaven, or in case of a wife, to get her husband into heaven. And I'm loving my children not because of what they can do for me, but because I want them to be so good that they go to heaven too. And that faith in what God does and desires in terms of the holiness, the morality, the uprightness, the virtue, the love of truth, the love of goodness and beauty, those qualities are what I want to seek with my spouse and with my children, so we all go to heaven and none of us end up in hell.
My wife says, I'm the spiritual headache of the household.
See? It's only spiritual. Father, where are you from?
From Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Good to have you here, Father.
Thank you.
And what is your comment? Or
Well,
question?
I do appreciate the discussion going on, and the point of encouraging parents to do what's right and to work with their kids that way. But I also know that Pope St. John Paul II, he specifically spoke of not imposing but proposing, and I know that the approach is, how about if we ask the children and propose to them and have them answer? So how do you work that out?
Parallels break down, Father. First of all, this is an adult-to-adult relationship that St. John Paul is talking about. All right, it's adult to adult. He is not responsible for raising me, so he can't impose anything on me. A parent, on the other hand, has to impose, and the balance between imposing and proposing shifts as they get older. I'm going to impose a lot on my 5-year-old. They don't have reasoning capacity to understand why what I might propose would be good. So I think that's a factor. But I think a deeper point that Father brought up. Okay, question, Father. If NASA sends a space exploration vehicle towards Mars, and they are off as they launch by 0.00001 degree, how far off does that thing miss Mars by?
Ooh, I'd say that they would miss that by quite a few miles because you're going millions of miles. So you have to multiply that. I forget how many million miles that is, but you have to multiply that by the number of million miles between here and Mars.
Which touches on the point Father made, which is most modern experts come from the idea that children are naturally cooperative. That you can propose to them and they will come to understand. You just need to be reasonable and come, let us all talk together. If that's wrong, if Christianity is correct, that children are not naturally cooperative, they are naturally willful, then every idea that comes from that erroneous idea will miss the mark by 1,000,000 miles.
Yep.
You will come up with theories and philosophies that flat out do not work because you started with the wrong premise.
I oftentimes talk about the French philosopher Rousseau, who talked about human beings as noble savages, that if you just take away the rules of society, government, and the church, people will naturally be noble savages. And I point out
Did he lock his doors?
Well, he sired a number of children, but never raised a 2-year-old. So he had no idea. Ma'am, where are you from?
I'm from New Jersey.
And your question?
And my question is, I have observed in my generation of immigrants here in the United States that when our children were growing up, they were somewhat confused by the influences of the outside culture, the environment. And when they come home, they have to adhere to our values, you know, especially values related to religion, values related to staying out and
Just family life.
Yes, family life. So I don't know, you know, some of them, you know, turned out to be good. You know, some of my contemporaries' children, you know, had problems. And I don't know if this has anything to do with the fact that, you know, they are dealing with two different cultural values.
All right. You know, as someone who also grew up in a bilingual home, and you know,
That was back when you only knew two?
yeah, and
You big dummy.
I know it, but also my grandparents are from the old country. My parents were born here, but you know, there was certainly this influence of another culture. Fortunately, all my friends were Polish American too, but you know, so we had something in common. But this is a real issue.
It's huge. My experience has been that many of the folks from other cultures come with much stronger family ties. Their families are more cohesive. What tends to happen is that the Americanization of their kids, the kids get out there and the kids see, hey, well, that's a lot cooler than the way my mom and dad think. That's a lot more freedom than my mom and dad are giving me.
And that's so old country.
Old country.
Right.
I spend a lot of time trying to shore up parents from other cultures to basically have enough confidence that the way they're doing it is good. The way we're doing it is not so good. And so the best you can do is to adhere to your beliefs and your morals, and then what happens, happens. But at least you can say, I was true to what I believed to be true. I didn't compromise to get along with the culture.
And I would add that it would be wise to let children know we have an important set of values to help America with. We can help the American culture at this present state with some of the good sense we still bring instead of the dumb ideas we hear from the experts. Ma'am, where are you from?
I'm living in Europe. I'm from New York.
Okay,
But
and
originally
your
I'm from the
question?
Philippines.
And your question?
Yes. What you have said really applies to everybody, whether they're immigrants or they're Americans. Because I think what we are dealing with right now is high tech and also lack of role models in government and even in the family. And I think, you know, for some families, the parents have distinctive roles, a father and a mother. What we are seeing now, because of the economic situation, both parents have to work. And sometimes the wife earns more money than the husband, and they really have to change roles. And that is a little bit of a discomfort, because as open-minded as this society is, they still look down on a man playing the role of a house husband, you know? And that affects the children's upbringing, you know. So I think for parents, they really have to be comfortable as to who they are, whether they assume the role of being the, you know, the breadwinner or the child person.
Anything that alters a parent's style, whether it's guilt because I have to work, whether it's insecurity because I'm a single mom, is going to change how he or she raises the kids. And they've done studies. And what they found was, given those kinds of constellations, the biggest single factor in raising the kid well is the parent being confident in being the parent, rather than, therefore, you know, my husband stays home and I have to work, so we don't have quite an ideal situation. The confidence in the parent. That's why a good single mom as a confident parent can raise a great kid.
Right, right. But you have to have that sense of confidence, not just in me, but in what I'm trying to accomplish.
That's it.
It's not about because I've also seen studies showing that sociopaths are the most self-confident people in the world.
That's right.
But
That's right.
But it's confidence in what's good. But also, we have run out of time completely.
I'm not done.
I know, but well, you're done, all right. So, but we have to go. Let me give you our blessing. Almighty God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And again, we want to thank you for the support you give us. It's still the summer. A lot of you are still on vacation. Some kids are starting to go back to school. But we certainly ask that when you do go away, please try not to forget us in between your gas bill, your electric bill, and your cable bill, because all summer long, our bill collectors have not gone on vacation a day. They're there. So do please keep us in mind, as well as all those who are, as we said at the beginning of the show, suffering over in the Middle East. God bless you and thank you. And thank you, Dr. Ray,
always a
very
pleasure,
much.
Father.
Delight to
Always.
have you here. Good night and God bless.